Yo pregunto a los presentes si no se han puesto a pensar que esta tierra es de nosotros y no del que tenga más. Yo pregunto si en la tierra nunca habrá pensado usted que si las manos son nuestras, es nuestro lo que nos dé. A desalambrar, que la tierra es nuestra, es tuya y de aquel, de Pedro y María, de Juan y José. Si molesto con mi canto a alguien que no quiera oír, le aseguro que es un gringo o un dueño de este país. A desalambrar, que la tierra es nuestra, es tuya y de aquel, de Pedro y María, de Juan y José. A desalambrar, que la tierra es nuestra, es tuya y de aquel, de Pedro y María, de Juan y José.
It's my pleasure to see you and to give you a hug and to kiss you from afar. I am very happy to be here in this encounter, in this dialogue that has served as a process to retake and regain power, to flag our struggles. I would like to say hello and welcome you warmly from the Dominican Republic. I am Elsa Sanchez, and I would like to express our desire to join this proposal and this conference, the ORFC, the Oxford Real Farming Conference. I would like to take stock of some of the debates that we've held during these days. First, we held an encounter from peasant to peasant. This meeting with the youngsters showed us that our youngsters are following up closely and they are also taking part in the conversation. They are inheriting the knowledge that's being passed on generation by generation. They're also participating in the debate that's being held in our continent and in other spaces. And today, we would like to discuss a topic that is fascinating and that, in fact, is part of the reality of our colleagues here present. We're going to be talking about criminalization. In these moments so hard for humanity, criminalization remains one of the main elements in our agenda, in the agenda of the peasant movement. From the Via Campesina, also from the CLOC and other political spaces, we have confirmed that criminalization is a strategy promoted by some sectors in our countries and in our territories. Some entities use strategies of criminalization in order to scare us away. This criminalization is used against our peoples. However, we won't surrender. We hold our flags high and we sustain and promote our proposal, the proposal of peasant rights. At this time, in our countries and also at a global level, we have been adding the peasant rights to our agenda because the recognition of these rights by the UN can be a tool to fight against the criminalization of our colleagues. Welcome to all of you to this dialogue, to this conference that is being held today. Today, we will have the presentation of 3 colleagues coming from 3 different territories. They are here to depart with us. We have the presence of Aide Moreno from Fensuagro in Colombia. Colombia has a lot to add to this conversation. Colombia has been struggling, and Aide is going to share with us from her experience. We also have Alicia with us today, coming from Paraguay, from Conamuri. She will be sharing her experience with us too. And lastly, we have Carla Patricio from Honduras. Honduras is a territory where they have also been struggling, and she will present her experience. According to where you're watching from, either this morning, this afternoon, or this evening, we will be exchanging all of their experiences. After this Mystica that we used as an introduction, we would like to share our experiences. These people that we displayed, they are not our dead, they are well alive among us. For this reason, I would like to give the word to our colleague from Paraguay, to Alicia Amarilla. She will be sharing with us her experience. It's all yours now. Thank you very much, my dear colleague Elsa. I come from the Organization of Peasant Indigenous Women called Conamuri from Paraguay. I live in the district of Aguazu in a small city. This is located in the southern area of my country. I think talking about criminalization in my country includes a series of behaviors, includes a series of tyrannic behaviors, includes the persecution of social movements and individuals. We have been enduring this difficult situation for a very long time. I think very little is known out there about what the situation is like in Paraguay. At present, our president comes from the Stronist school. His dad was Alfredo Stroessner's right hand, in fact. He was a dictator that reigned during 35 years. And we find ourselves still in this transition to democracy. However, we find that the old structure and the old ways of functioning remain. And the military continues to have a very strong presence, following the steps of the dictatorship regime. Therefore, we may say the process is not over. In Paraguay, there is the social movements are being persecuted fiercely. 90% of our land is in the hands of companies, may they be public or either national or transnational. Peasant movements are being persecuted, dispossessed from our lands, and also evicted from our small parcels of land. The class struggle takes place in the countryside. The struggle for the seeds, for sovereignty, for water resources, for the land, even for a strip of land, Even a small strip of land may generate a massacre. Our movements are struggling and fighting every day just to survive one more day. As women, as indigenous peasant women, we are being affected very much by this situation. Our natural heritage is in the hands of foreign companies. We are women who are peasant women, stranded without land. And thus, our sorrow is even greater. For instance, we are being affected by the fumigation of our land. Our land is populated by transgenic soy, and this affects us massively. Some toxic pesticides have been used massively on our land, and we are directly affected by this. There are many people who have been intoxicated or who have fallen ill by this. Our hospitals are crowded with these patients. However, we are not supposed to denounce the situation. Of course, we don't denounce our situation because we are far too scared of the patron, of the real owner of the lands. Human rights defenders are also being persecuted. Who are human rights defenders? I'm talking about people defending all sorts of human rights. In our country, a particular sector started a warfare-like conflict. Obviously, not all social movements are being equally persecuted. Why is that? In September, last September, 2 girls were executed. One of them was my own daughter. They were cousins. They were related to people defending human rights. As I said, they were executed. One of them has disappeared. One woman has disappeared. Another one was kidnapped. And this morning, we woke up to the terrible news that one of our colleagues has been arrested and has been condemned and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Allegedly, he took part in the kidnapping of someone. For us, as part of the CLOC and the Via Campesina peasant movement, we know this is not real. At the time when he was arrested, he was teaching in a school in Paraguay. He was working as a cook. Although many of our organizations testified against all these accusations, he has still been sentenced to 20 years in prison. Therefore, we may conclude there is a real persecution against all of those movements facing and planting resistance to this oppressing model. We are being thus criminalized. We count our political prisoners by tens and thousands, tens and hundreds. We accompany them, and as a result, we also suffer from persecution. Our movement is being persecuted. And this happens in different ways. Occasionally, we are being robbed. Our shops are robbed. It is a kind of subtle persecution. It's more in the terms of, along the lines of defamation, smearing campaigns, robbing our shops. And all of the organizations accompanying political prisoners have been subject to this kind of persecutions. This is not an idle situation. They use different defamations and smearing campaigns against us. For instance, they accuse us of being guerrilla fighters. Every day that passes, the situation deteriorates further, and I may even say this is true also for Latin America as a whole. In Latin America, we are suffering from great persecutions, even supported by the laws. New laws are being passed to support persecution. New forms are constantly being found in order to persecute us. Every day that goes by, we are more disgregated as a community as a result of this persecution. Even the intelligence services is involved. More and more, we have spies among our groups that are reporting back on us. And in spite of this situation, the CLOC and the Via Campesina try to promote rural reform, agrarian reform, for a better redistribution of land. Because the heart of agriculture lies in land, and the means of production are in the hands of the companies that are persecuting us. And we firmly believe that fighting for the land is fundamental to our claim. We have to strengthen our network in Latin America. We have to keep fighting for food sovereignty. Via Campesina is all about food sovereignty. It's all about defending peasant agriculture. It's all about agroecology. And all of these have been our core values. This is where we gain strength. They have served us as a guide throughout the process that we've been carrying out and the struggles. For us, it's also vital to have a good communication going. We need to communicate our struggles, what we stand for. We have to communicate it properly, because without that communication, those communication efforts, all of our struggles would be in vain. Now, during the pandemic, there is even a greater necessity to communicate further. In these times of the pandemic, we feel even more cornered because we are forced to stay home while all of the entities persecuting us gain more terrain, while we are being evicted, while we're still suffering from persecution. For this reason, I think it's vital to be prepared as an organization. We need to be ready to fight politically. We need to be up to speed to face the situation that we are currently facing. Our peasant and indigenous women, and as peasant and indigenous women, we believe in the training of our colleagues, in the training of their children, and we believe in keeping the struggle alive to defend human rights. This is vital because in Paraguay we experience all sorts of human rights violations. Therefore, we need to capitalize on all of those rights already acquired and recognized. Therefore, we need to strengthen our position. We need to keep moving forward. We need to move forward towards our utopia. Thank you so much. Thank you, my dear Alicia. We agree with all of the elements that you have brought up. Indeed, peasant and indigenous women are being criminalized. Not only are they being persecuted, not only are they being mistreated, but also they are being marginalized. And all of these crimes remain impune. No reports are being drafted on this. No follow-up is being done. There are no laws to support us. The law only supports the persecutors. Therefore, I think all the elements that you have brought up are the right ones. The way that we rally ourselves, the way that we coordinate ourselves is key. We need to capitalize on all of those tools that we have in order to stop the criminalization of our peoples. Thank you very much to Alicia. I wanted to say that the voices of our female leaders have a presence in the debates being held in the continent. Carla has a similar experience. In Honduras, in 2020, we had a very hard year in terms of killings. More than 7,000 peasants denounced persecution. 8 land human rights defenders working on land were persecuted. In fact, 7 people disappeared. These were some of the main things that happened in 2020 in Honduras. Of course, this happens on top of the killing of other colleagues. Therefore, I think it's high time we give the floor to our colleague representing Honduras. She will be providing further data. She will be putting it into context. And she will also continue along the lines that Alicia has set out. With no further ado, welcome Carla from Honduras.
Thank you very much. My name is Carla Alegría. I've been a part of Via Campesina Honduras, and it's an honor to be able to share my points of view with all of you. My colleague Wendy Cruz made an introduction of how our country is, and the situation is not much different to what our colleague was saying. Honduras is being categorized in Central America as the first country, the country with the highest amount of assassinations of farmers and land defenders. This is a struggle. The access to land is linked to the protection of our rights. Being human rights defenders and defenders of the rights to land is a crime in our country. As our colleagues said, many of our colleagues have been assassinated in 2020 before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, the agrarian reform was not a priority of the government. We have been always left behind by the policies. There is no agrarian policy that is going to help us, or even a legal framework. Via Campesina has introduced several norms, like a new agrarian reform law and a law to decriminalize the peasant struggle. But we as organization, we are proud of having a declaration with this charter of the peasants' rights. This is something that we are trying to introduce in our country. Honduras abstained in this vote, and apparently this is not something important for our government. Given this context of criminalization that leads to evictions, harassment, persecutions, and even assassinations, as we said, there are 7,000 colleagues with precautionary measures. The fact of initiating a process to have access to the land, which is something enshrined in our constitution, then automatically you are taken to court. In our country, this is a crime that can have sentences up to 4 years. But since our rights have been violated more and more with time, so they use the crime of usurpations and other crimes. Some colleagues have been accused of terrorism and kidnapping. So the idea is that peasants, they don't want peasants to be given any kind of precautionary measures. As I said, defending our water, our natural resources, our land, our air is a crime. We can see this in our statistics. 8 of our colleagues from Guapinol have been detained, and everyone knows that public officers and some MPs have have been taken to court because of tax evasion offenses, while our colleagues have been in prison for over a year, and their lawyers have presented all kinds of recourses, but they are still in prison. We take this as a reference. If you try to defend these resources, this is what is going to happen to you. The criminalization, up to a certain extent, well, when you're evicted, all your rights are violated. But what can you do if on December 26th, in the context of a pandemic where we should be trying to protect your lives, and then the daughter of Felipe Vasquez tells you, well, my father has just been killed in my home. This kind of testimonials makes you think about the situation. Well, when you receive such a phone call and they tell you, I'm under threat, what can I do? As our colleague from the CNT in La Paz, what can you do then? Via Campesina and CNTC are trying to protect their lives, but we are fighting a monster. The system is in cahoots with the government, policemen, even the authorities, the judicial authorities, up to a point when our peasants go to the police to say that they are under threat with proof. There was a case where the peasants or even took the weapons from the people that have threatened them, but that doesn't work. And the assassination of our colleagues, we're just a statistic. It doesn't matter if you are a woman, if you are young, if you are old. If you are in this struggle, you will just be part of these statistics. Through the criminalization and the assassination, well, there are other instruments. During the pandemic and during the storms that had also an important impact, we have some peasant bases in Santa Barbara that have been completely lost. And this also increased the persecution by the state against our colleagues. So before the pandemic, our country is militarized. But however, this militarization has been made illegal. How? In November 2019, a decree was passed where a new agrarian reform plan was assigned to the military with a budget of 40,000 million. Even if we know that there is an entity in charge of this agrarian reform, they are not doing much. But why are they giving money to the military? What is the goal? What should we understand with this? What they have sown is more fear, intimidation, more violence. They haven't even sown any kind of seeds or anything that could be part of this agrarian reform. Something else I would like to mention: during this pandemic, our government passed another decree where national lands that is property of the state are being given for 30 years by just peanuts. Opposing and extractivist projects like this, as we said, leads to the criminalization and harassment, threats, etc. And the most concerning thing is that there is even the possibility of losing your own life. The situation in our country is bad. We have no legal framework. That's why we use international instruments. We are trying that the Declaration on the Peasants' Rights is acknowledged in our countries. We want an article to be included in the new criminal code to decriminalize peasant struggles, so they are taken to civil courts instead of criminal courts. The situation is quite difficult. Thank you for being attentive to the situation in my country. We want to demand the freedom for our colleagues in Guapinol, because it is not a crime to defend our natural resources. Thank you very much. Our colleague Carla, well, thank you. This movement to demand food sovereignty is being answered with repression. This is a clear example in our continent and in the world that is being forced by neoliberal governments and far-right governments, that together with the war on the media, this war is being brought to us, and the media are becoming also oppressors. Our proposal from the peasant movement is to do what our colleague just said. We need to raise our flags and say that they are not going to stop us. Our struggle is going to go on. Men and women are going to continue with this process. We are going to continue with our actions, with our alliances, mobilizations, and what we are doing today is a process so that our voices are heard globally. Thank you, Carla. Now we are going to welcome Aide Moreno from Fensuagro, from Colombia. She's going to share with us her experience, specifically as our colleagues from Honduras and Paraguay did. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. For everyone that is listening to us, I would like to thank our colleagues for the invitation to be part of this seminar. In this situation that we are living, which is concerning and which is limiting for us in our organizations, in our regions, I think that it is really important to be in this scenario where different people can listen to us and we can raise awareness about the situation in our countries, about what is going on in our territories. In Colombia, we have been struggling so that our country becomes a peaceful country. Unfortunately, we were unable to do it despite the Havana Accords signed over 4 years ago. We expected that we could have peace. We've been fighting for many years from the social movements and peasant and indigenous movements. We've been fighting to have peace in our territories. We thought that with the signature of the accords between the Colombian government and the FARC guerrilla, we could have peace as we wanted. Unfortunately, this is not what has happened. Thousands of members of the guerrilla thought that through political action, these accords signed in Havana could become a reality. Unfortunately, after signing the treaties, not only ex-fighters have been assassinated all over our country, but with this new government led by Ivan Duque, trade union leaders, peasant leaders, and others have been also assassinated. This is something we've seen in our country There are systematic selective assassinations focusing on trade union leaders and social leaders, like in the 70s and the 80s. In 2004, we had a war with 8 million inhabitants that were displaced all over our country. Some of them had to go outside our country. Many peasant leaders were evicted from the territories. Our trade union movement was one of the peasant organizations that was most affected in our country. Peasant trade unions were almost exterminated. I am part of the Independent Peasant Workers Union, and we are mourning because of the assassination of my brother that was assassinated in December. My organization is in mourning, and all the whole peasant movement. We are doing a campaign in order to find the body of the corpse of my brother, in order to give him some rest. We want to find his body to give him some rest where we want him. That's what we have been living in my family. We are living in a really sad situation. And that's the situation of many other families in my country. We see how people are killed on the roads, on our social leaders, our trade union leaders, in order to prevent the people from organizing, to prevent the people to fight against these unfair practices that go against the interests of the Colombian people and are only benefiting transnational companies. For them, well, they are well protected. For multinational companies that are exploiting our land and our resources, they are well protected. There is protection for those that are felling down trees, as we saw in La Macarena recently, in the highlands in my country. There's protection for them. There are also safeguards for them so that they can have access to those territories, but there are no safeguards or no guarantees for the Colombian people. And I talk about the people because the policies passed in Congress go against the welfare of the Colombian people as a whole. Legislation here is only passed to benefit transnational companies. This is something that we need to tell here. During the pandemic, our government has passed laws in order to provide resources to Avianca, to large companies in Colombia, that even some of them even charge from each COVID-related death in Colombia. So there are even some people that there are some corruption allegations. Our local government has given these multinational companies resources so that our loved ones that haven't died because of COVID are supposedly enlisted as COVID-related deaths. Many of the people that have been registered as COVID-related deaths didn't die of COVID. So this is a problem, and many of these deaths are being silenced in hospitals. So, dear colleagues, we are facing a social and human rights crisis, a grave one, and that's the situation our national federation is living. Our social leaders are being assassinated. As I said, my brother Eduardo Moreno, he was a peasant born in Castillo Meta, and he was a leader since he was really young. He was a militant of the Patriotic Union and the Communist Party. He was a councilman in and member of the trade union of the peasant trade union, and he worked in the Guaviares department. He fought to defend the rights and the territories of the peasants in Puerto Meta. During the violence, many peasants were evicted.
He defended the right of access to land and of remaining in the land because there was no other guarantee. He defended the right of Colombians to have access to land. In Colombia, he didn't have any further possibilities to defend the access to land because he had to forcefully migrate somewhere else. He was in his 50s when he was murdered. We are mourning him, and it weighs in our heart and in our soul to think that our brother was killed and the government does nothing about this. According the words of my brother, or rather, according to the government and to the prosecutor, the social movements are criminal movements or are associated with criminal movements. Therefore, there is no worth in defending our cause. Fifteen days after the body of my brother disappeared, the government has been incapable of taking action, and we are only left to think that the government is an accomplice to the crimes of the companies and other entities. We live in remote rural areas, a poor region that is being taken advantage of by other actors. Our local government doesn't provide sufficient guarantee of keeping us alive because not only has the life of my brother been taken away, but also the national prosecutor has found the dead bodies of other people that were killed. Some of our neighbors who might have been indigenous peoples or from different origins. No one has ever claimed those bodies. Families bury the dead bodies of their relatives without ever saying anything about it because they are scared. Our village, our local government didn't subscribe to the peasant rights that were ratified by other countries. The peasant movement in Colombia is fighting to have these rights being recognized. We are fighting to defend the lives of our peasants. Peasants shouldn't be criminalized just for defending the right of access to land. The national government of Colombia didn't ratify the UN Declaration on the Rights of Peasants. Colombia didn't ratify the UN Declaration. Why? According to the national government in Colombia, the peasant movements are associated with criminal movements. And they don't see that we are the ones defending the access to land the right to having clean air, the right to having a proper environment. None of this information reaches the right audiences. My dear colleagues and allies, in these times that we live in this space that we occupy, it's really important to ask all of our fellow organizations to keep fighting, to keep in the struggle to defend our rights. We would like to join your calling. Thank you very much, Heide, for calling upon the world on this solidarity movement. The situation that you have described, the current context in Colombia, the tragic experience lived by your family, and the tragic destiny of your brother, Omar, who still lives among us, is a proof of this struggles. The goal of this conference is to listen to one another in order to prevent that the militarization of society, that the persecution of peasant movements takes place. We're here fighting the criminalization of peasants. This is why our colleagues here present have come together in this dialogue. We wanted to exchange our experiences and describe the realities we are faced with day to day. We will now start the Q&A session. This is the time to ask your your questions, send your comments in. And I believe we have a first question from our audience. How could we better defend the rights of peasants in the UK? How could we better defend those rights in Colombia? What are the right steps to take? Are there any other possibilities of action that we could take? Elena Paula is asking this question. So, summarizing, the question by Elena Paul is, how can we better defend peasant rights in the UK? Is the UN Declaration of the Rights of Peasants the right way? Let's see what the colleague has to say about this. The question also reads, could we use the UN Declaration in Colombia as a tool? Aide, all yours. Yes, I think there is a lot that you can do in terms of raising awareness from the UK and from other countries to help Colombia. In particular, you can try and hold our governments accountable to face their legal obligations to abide by the treaties. The peace treaty hasn't been implemented by the Colombian government, and I think the embassies could try to hold our government accountable, because the Colombian government has the obligation enshrined in the constitution to implement this treaty fully. It is also enshrined in our constitution that there is an obligation to protect the lives of human rights defenders. Death toll, it's not a legal option. However, our fellow leaders and colleagues are being killed with impunity. We have more than 300 leaders that have been killed in our country. in the last couple of years. And the current government is not opening any processes, is not following up, it's not taking this to justice. Therefore, I think from our social movements, from our fellow brotherhoods and sisterhoods, I think we should try to hold our government accountable. I think we should demand the completion and full implementation of the Colombian Peace Accord. We also have to demand that the government ratifies the UN Declaration on the Rights of Peasants. This declaration has been ratified by many countries across the world, but it wasn't ratified by Colombia. Why is that? We have to think about what's at stake for them. Bear in mind that this declaration was ratified by many other countries. However, Colombia refrains from it. As I was saying, our leaders and defenders are being killed with impunity, and no justice process are being started on this. No further investigations are being carried out. And we have to demand that justice is done. And if the government is failing to open those judicial processes, then it's an accomplice of those crimes. By remaining silent, by not protecting actively the lives of peasants under threat, they are being an accomplice. However, from our social movements of Via Campesina, we can take urgent action. In particular, now, we have an open letter that we are passing around to other fellow organizations. In this letter, we explain the case of my murdered brother, but also the case of many other defenders under threat, being left alone by the Colombian government. This is how we are accompanying them. We have been fighting for too many years. Far too many murderings have taken place. Thank you very much, dear colleague. Dear Alicia, Sagar Sumar from Haiti has also asked us a question. She says, when will justice be done against the blue helmets of the UN that have been raping women in Africa and Haiti? What can Alicia say about this? Alicia, please switch on your microphone. Of course, the big interrogation, the big question mark is the when. When will justice be done? In fact, the international agreements are constantly being violated in our country. From the outside, I think more pressure could be exerted. We have to raise our voices and demand that justice be done, that the laws be applied. Our government signs international agreements to defend children's rights. However, our social movements are being co-opted, and the way that they shield themselves, the way that they defend their wrongdoing is by saying that our social movement is linked to narco-trafficking and organized crime in Paraguay. Therefore, international agreements are violated constantly. What would be our demand to the state of Paraguay? Well, I think this has been repeated a number of times. Our demand will be that laws be respected, the murderings continue, and I think internationally, we could use more international pressure, to be honest. All of the actions that we are carrying out in a way or another could use the help of the international pressure. Thank you very much, dear colleague. Now we will give 1 minute to a remaining colleague, and we would like her to answer the 2 remaining questions. And this way we will wrap up. Would you like to make any comment according to the questions we've had? Sure, thank you very much. I think our colleagues have already mentioned this. I think it is very important to call on international solidarity. In Honduras, we have also called upon the support of international allies in order for them to put more pressure. We have been repeatedly asking for this help and for this solidarity. We keep calling for help, however, our government keeps ignoring all of our demands. Therefore, I think, and I agree with our colleague, I think it would be very important to call upon the international community to exert more pressure. Thank you very much, dear colleague. One of my colleagues from Honduras said once, when they can't kill you, they follow you, they persecute you, and they process you. They process us for any insignificant reasons. Is this true? I think you have been referring to this reality today. He also called upon raising all our voices together to ask for peace and justice. This is to say that the solidarity and the coordination of our social and peasant movement, the coordination of the global peasant movement is vital. This is what will save us from all of these crimes, from all of these negative wrongdoings by our leaders. We can only stop them together. We can only keep moving forward if we stick together. The criminalization, the sentencing of our brothers and sisters to prison for ridiculous sentences, all of this needs to be stopped. Currently, the CLOC and the Via Campesina is carrying out a campaign calling upon solidarity. And I would like to think here of some countries such as Venezuela. We are denouncing the abuses that take place in all of our countries because the Pachamama, Mother Earth, is ours and no one can ever take it away from us. Therefore, it is in these fora, in these processes of dialogue, where we can make ourselves visible, where we can raise awareness of our situation, and where we can raise awareness about the criminalization that's been taking place against our peoples. Therefore, I would like to thank you. Thanks to the organizers of this conference wholeheartedly for giving us the space and the chance to voice our concerns. Thank you also to our colleagues, and thank you for having the space. Thank you for the support, and thank you for continuing being our ally and for moving this course of action forward. Thank you very much. And with this, I would like to wrap up. Thank you very much to Aide. Thanks to Carla. And also thank you to Alicia. Thank you very much for being part of this big family that is CLOC-Vía Campesina, an organization, a peasant movement that is global. And we keep globalizing the struggle. We'd like to finish with our fists high in the sky because we will never give up. We will never surrender. Thank you very much. We'll keep in the struggle. Of course we will. Thank you very much to our technicians, and thank you also for playing the last part of our Mystica. Thanks to all of the people who attended this conference, may it be in the morning, in the afternoon, or in the evening. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.